Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings Benny's Bats video for, let's see, we got Monday, June 6th today. It's a 10-game slate that we have going on tonight. All the games are starting late today at, 7 o'clock. There's no early games, so we're going to talk about the 10 games we have on tap for tonight. What we like to do here in the Benny's Bat section is we take a look at each pitcher that's on the mound, figure out what their weakness is, and then figure out which bats on the other team profile to do the best against them. So let's get started right at the top. The first game we're going to talk about is the Chicago Cubs going up against the Philadelphia Phillies. John Lester's on the mound for the Cubs, and he's been pretty good in 2016. Has about a 220-ish batting average to both right and left-handed bats over the course of about the last 3 seasons since about 2014. Like I said, he's been pretty solid, so it's not like we want a lot of bats on this Philly team. If we're going to go up against anybody, the catcher options that they have, whether it's Carlos Ruiz or Cameron Rupp, both guys do pretty well against left-handed pitching. Ruiz is a 371 WOBA, 216 ISO guy. Always very cheap, always pretty low owned. Like I said, does hit left-handed pitching very well. Good ballpark there in Philly for him, so he could be an option to look at. Maikel Franco, right-handed bat, always in play against left-handed pitching, especially at home. And then you can look at the rookie, maybe Tommy Joseph as well, another right-handed bat with a little bit of power. I mean, I'm not really trying to take a lot of bats here against Lester, but if you are going to take anybody, those are the guys that, kind of stand out based on the numbers. On the other side, we are looking to take a lot of Chicago bats. Adam Morgan is not good. One of the worst pitchers we have on the mound today. Right-handed bats do great against them. Left-handed bats do okay against them. He's a left-handed pitcher. A guy like Chris Bryant in a good spot, 346 WOBA, big 230 ISO score, a lot of power, especially in Philadelphia. Anthony Rizzo, very good in lefty-on-lefty matchups, 369 WOBA, 180 ISO since the start of 2015. Ben Zobrist, probably one of their better bats against left-handed pitching, 405 WOBA for him, so huge WOBA number. 190 ISO, does have a little bit of power, especially in Philly. I think he could, get a hold of one and jack it out. I mean, even guys like Dexter Fowler, 380 WOBA, 157 ISO. Javi Baez has been hitting a little bit better as well. So you got a lot of bats on this Cubs team that I think you can look at. It's one of the better offenses we have in the league going up against one of the worst pitchers. So definitely think it's a really good spot here for Cubs bats. You can stack them up. You can use a couple of them as one-offs. Definitely think you want to have some exposure here. Next game, talk about Kansas City at Baltimore. Danny Duffy, the lefties on the mound for Kansas City. Right-handed bats have been, the ones that have a higher average, a little bit over about 260 over the course of the last 2 years against them, giving up about a home run every 7 innings or so. I really like Trumbo in this situation. 358 WOBA for him, huge 275 ISO score, just massive power for Trumbo. This game is in Baltimore. Duffy's a guy that does have a pretty high fly ball rate. You go into a place like Baltimore, Camden Yards, really good home run hitters ballpark. I think Trumbo's in a great spot today. I want to look at the right-handed bats here. So maybe guys like Adam Jones make a little bit of sense. Manny Machado, even though he's better in righty-on-righty matchups, still hits left-handed pitching kind of well, pretty well too. So I think he's another guy you can look at, Trumbo, Machado, Jones. If you want to go down to guys like Jonathan Scope or, maybe a Matt Wieters to throw in there as well, they're also valid options. I think that this Baltimore offense is going to put up a couple runs today. On the other side, this Royals offense is in a good spot too. I mean, Mike Wright, one of the, another one of the worst pitchers we have on the mounds. Left-handed bats have hit well over 300 against him. Eric Hosmer at only 3,400 seems incredibly mispriced to me. He's like $500 or $600 cheaper than Kendrys Morales, and I have no idea why. Hosmer's been pretty hot lately. He's 2 of 4 lifetime against Wright with a home run. Wright does have limited innings pitched, but like I said, left-handed bats have been killing him. Hosmer's a guy, 392 WOBA, 200 ISO against right-handed pitching. So I really think that he's in an absolutely amazing spot today at 3,400. Easily one of my favorite cash game plays. I just think he's so mispriced today, and I have no idea why. Good hitters ballpark like Baltimore. I think he's somebody with a lot of upside. You look at this KC team, and there's not a lot of big names, especially with all the injuries they have, and especially with the injuries to some of the lefties, guys like Moustakas and Alex Gordon. But I mean, this team just keeps putting up runs and they keep hitting. So if you want to look at some of the cheap guys towards the bottom, we're getting guys like, Whit Merrifield hitting second, who's doing really well right now since he's been put in that spot. You got guys like Paolo Orlando, who's been doing well. Sal Perez is back now. He's been a pretty decent bat for them. So, on paper, there's not a lot of guys that stand out, but this Kansas City team just keeps getting it done. So I don't think you can sleep on them. Next game, we're going to talk about the Los Angeles Angels against the New York Yankees. Masahiro Tanaka pitching for the Yankees. Low batting average allowed to both left and right-handed bats. He's been a pretty solid pitcher. His one little problem is he does give up some solo shots, but he hasn't been walking anybody, and he doesn't give up a lot of hits. So if you give up a home run with nobody on base or 2 home runs with nobody on base, it's only 2 runs, and you're still getting a quality start out of him because he's going, 7 innings every time, striking out 6 or 7 batters. So he's been pretty solid. This is this isn't the greatest hitting team that he has to go up against. Obviously, Mike Trout, somebody that you want to worry about. Righty on righty matchups, Trout, 414 WOBA, 288 ISO score. Other than him, though, I mean, where do you really want to go? You got guys with power like a CJ Cron, maybe an Albert Pujols who does hit with power against right-handed pitching. But other than that, you're looking at guys like Johnny Giavotella and, Escobar. And, I mean, I just think there are softer spots today, and these guys are not great hitters. So I do like Tanaka a little bit here on the mound. Obviously you gotta worry about Trout and pitching around him and not putting yourself in bad spots. But other than him, this isn't really a lineup that scares me all that much. On the other side of the game, we got Matt Shoemaker, and he has been very, very good in his last couple starts. His last 3 starts, he has 12, 11, and 8 strikeouts, giving you quality innings, not giving up a ton of hits. He's gotten the walk problem that he had under control, and he's got the home run problem that he had under control lately. Now, it had been something that, had been killing him in the past. He's been walking a few too many guys, giving up a lot of home runs. I mean, this guy gives up a lot of fly ball contact, a lot of hard contact. But like I said, the last 3 or 4 games, he has been very, very good. Those numbers are all down. So, I don't know. He is still kind of a young pitcher, so I don't know if this is something that is going to maintain or if he's going to regress back to the mean. But at the moment, he's been pitching pretty good. Even though he's a right-handed pitcher, right-handed bats do have a higher average and more home runs against them the last couple of years. There really aren't a lot of guys in the Yankees that stand out. If you're looking for a righty-on-righty guy with power, I mean, A-Rod's probably the guy you look at, but I know he's been hitting better since coming back off the DL, but he's still not the A-Rod that he used to be when he was a feared hitter. I guess you can look at guys like Beltran and McCann. Left-handed bats do pretty well against right-handed pitching. So if I'm looking anywhere here, those are probably the guys I'd look at. I got to be honest. I mean, I'm a Yankees fan, and I really don't see the Yankees having a big game here today. Maybe if you want to use some of these guys as one-offs, but, I'm not looking to stack bats up against Shoemaker and, see where that takes me. Next game we can talk about New York Mets at the Pittsburgh Pirates. Steven Matz on the mound for the Mets, and Matz has been awesome. Right-handed bats are the ones who hit him a little better, but even against right-handed bats, they don't really have a very good average against them. Although I got to be honest, this is not an easy matchup. I mean, this Pittsburgh team has a lot of right-handed bats to go up against a lefty that hit left-handed pitching well. You got guys like Young Ho Kang, 369 WOBA, 202 ISO for him. Big bat in the middle of that order, shortstop, third base eligible. So I think you can find some room in your lineups for him. McCutchen, if he's back from, being injured, I think he left one of the games early last week. 367 WOBA for him, 195 ISO score. So I guess he's somebody else you can look at. Inexplicably, he's only like 3,600 today, which I felt like was really, really cheap when I looked at the price. Like I said, I know Matz has been pretty good lately, but, like I said, Kutch is a guy that, he's been hitting left-handed pitching well his entire career. I just felt like 3,600 seemed like it jumped out as me as just being a tad too cheap for him today. You can also look at some of the other guys there. I mean, Josh Harrison, another right-handed bat, pretty good against lefties, should be leading off on top of the order. Francisco Cervelli, the catcher, hits left-handed pitching. Left-handed pitching very well. Starling Marte, another guy that's pretty good, and I think he'll be very low owned because he's the most expensive of all the Pirates outfielders today. I know a lot of people always wind up playing guys like Polanco or McCutchen, but for some reason Marte is the most expensive today, and McCutchen's pretty cheap. So, Marte will probably go low owned for you, and again, he does hit left-handed pitching pretty well, so he could be another option for you to consider there. Like I said, I'm not really looking to pick on Matz here, but at the same point in time, I think it's a tough matchup for him. This Pittsburgh team can hit left-handed pitching. On the other side of this game, we got Jonathan Neese, the former Met, in a revenge game here. Right-handed bats hitting 299 against him with 10 home runs in 48 innings pitched in 2016. So, right-handers would be the way to go after him. But really, if you look at this Mets team, David Wright was the best bat they had against left-handed pitching, and he's on the shelf for about another month or so. I guess Cespedes, even though he missed the last 2 games, so make sure he's in the lineup, probably the best bat that they have left there. 358 WOBA, 251 ISO score for him. So he does have some power. He is a right-handed bat, does hit left-handed pitching well over his career, although he's actually better in righty-on-righty matchups. Another guy who I think is a really sneaky play for you, Wilmer Flores has been playing a lot of third base with David Wright out, and he is somebody who hits left-handed pitching extremely well. 377 WOBA, 248 ISO, and limited innings for Wilmer Flores. So I think he's definitely somebody in play. Like I said, he's kind of cheap, and Jonathan Neese, not really a pitcher that scares me all that much. So Wilmer Flores, definitely somebody I'm going to have exposure to. Next game we can talk about, we got Toronto at Detroit. Mike Fulmer, the rookie's on the mound for Detroit, and he's been really good. Giving up a couple home runs to right-handed bats, but that's really the only knock on him. He's a high strikeout pitcher. He was even when he was in the minor leagues. He's been mowing guys down. He's been limiting the amount of runs he's given up, not giving up a lot of hits at all. I mean, this kid is really, really solid. Definitely has some upside. You look at that Toronto team. I mean, you got two lefties on that team that you would be a little bit leery of. That's Michael Saunders and Justin Smoke. Neither one of them is a huge prospect, but the two guys usually do hit in the top 5 of that order lately. So I think they're two guys that you do need to worry about a little bit. And then you have a lot of those right-handed bats that do pretty well, even in righty-on-righty matchups. Guys like Batista, Donaldson, Edwin Encarnacion all have around WOBAs of 380, all have ISOs of 240 to 300. So every one of these guys profiles to do pretty well here. This hasn't been as good an offense in 2016 as it was in 2015, especially against the right-handed pitching. So I'm a little bit less afraid of them than I was last year. But like I said, they do have some big bats in there. There are a couple guys that can mash. So I don't expect Fulmer to go out there and get a shutout. But remember, this guy was lights out in his last start. I think he had, like 28 or 30 fantasy points, something like that. So he was very, very good. Price is still pretty reasonable. So I think Fulmer is another guy that you can look at here. On the other side of this game, we got J.A. Happ. J.A. Happ, left-handed pitcher. He's nothing special. I mean, right-handed bats hit about 265 against them. And you look at this Detroit team, they got a whole bunch of righties they're going to throw at him. In order, Miguel Cabrera, probably my favorite as long as he's in there. J.D. Martinez, another guy you can look at. Ian Kinsler, if he's in the game. Nick Castellanos, Justin Upton. Who am I missing here? Victor Martinez, all these guys do pretty well against left-handed pitching. So I think you're looking at an order that's going to throw 7 or 8 right-handed bats at them. All these guys have a little bit of power. All these guys are solid hitters. I do like Happ. I think he's a decent pitcher, but I just don't think that he's going to have a very easy time today because this is a very good lineup. It's a lengthy lineup that has good hitters from top to bottom, and I don't think they're going to make it easy on him. So J.A. Happ, not somebody I'm looking at. These Dodgers bats, these Detroit Tigers bats, I think it's a situation where, I wouldn't mind exposure to 1 or 2 of them here and there, but I think it's more of a situation where I'd use them in tournaments, try to stack them up, hopefully that they, get the Happ early and chase them and get into that bullpen. Probably the best way you want to go about it if you are looking to use these Detroit bats today, which, like I said, I think they're all in a pretty good spot against a guy like Happ. Next game we can talk about is Houston at Texas. Colby Lewis, the right-hander, he's actually not been bad in 2016. He's pretty even to right and left-handed bats over the last couple of years, about a 250 average to each side of the plate. So you're looking at guys in this Houston team. Carlos Correa is starting to heat up again. 359 WOBA, 208 ISO for him. Pretty decent in righty-on-righty matchups. I actually like him more than Altuve in righty-on-righty matchups. And his price is, drastically discounted to the price we have to pay for Altuve right now. So Correa, probably my favorite play of the righties. George Springer, another guy you can look at up towards the top of the order there. 349 WOBA, 181 ISO. So he's a solid bat. And then Colby Rasmus, who's been hitting cleanup for him lately. Rasmus has a lot of power, not a big WOBA guy, but he is somebody that, can get a hold of one and hit a home run here and there for you. So I think that Rasmus is the last guy that I'd probably look at. If you want to look at some of those other left-handed bats towards the bottom of the order, the Castros, the Valbuenas, whoever else they might have in there that they're throwing in there, I guess those guys are okay. But for the most part, I'm kind of looking at Rasmus and Correa as the only 2 bats I'd take here. On the other side of this game, we got Mikey Fires pitching for Houston. Left-handed bats this year hitting 271 against them. Right-handed bats are hitting 300, giving up 10 home runs in 61 innings pitched already. So, I think you can look at some of these guys on Texas. Fires has better numbers in the past than he does this year. He just really seems to be struggling. So, just go to the top of that Texas order and go right down. Jurickson Profar, Rougned Odor, whichever one of them is leading off up top. Ian Desmond in righty on righty situations, which Fiers has struggled with, is another bat you can look at. Beltre, not bad. He's 3 of 6 lifetime with a home run against Fiers already anyway. Guys like Nomar Mazara, the rookie outfielder. I like this kid a lot. Prince Fielder, even though he doesn't have a lot of power, so more of a cash game option for me than a guy I want to use in tournaments. But like I said, I really like this Rangers team. I think you can definitely stack them up. Good hitters ballpark down there in Texas. The weather's heating up right now, so balls are starting to fly out of that place. I think Texas bats are definitely one way that you can go. Like I said, not a big fan of Fiers this season. He's kind of been struggling, so I do think you can go and attack him. Next game we're going to talk about, we got Tampa Bay Rays against the Arizona Diamondbacks. You look at a guy like Chris Archer on the mound, and I mean, it is so hard for me to give you guys anything on Chris Archer because he is basically Jekyll and Hyde. He goes out there. We have no idea what we're going to get from this guy. I mean, one game he'll go out there, he'll pitch 7 innings, give up 4 hits, 1 run, and strike out 8 batters. The next game he'll come back, won't make it out of the 5th inning. He'll give up 10 hits, walk 4 guys, give up 6 runs, and only have 3 strikeouts. So it's very up and down. There's really no rhyme or reason for it. I mean, you look at some of the games that he's had against teams that are predominantly right-handed that you think he would do well against, and he's gotten lit up, given up 10 home runs already this year and 36 innings pitched to right-handed bats, which is very unlike him. The fly ball rate is incredibly elevated for him this year against righties, which again is something that he normally doesn't usually have. So he's a very tough guy to kind of, nail down. What we do know is he has a problem with walking batters, and he does have a problem with giving up home runs this year. So I think a guy like Paul Goldschmidt makes a lot of sense to use here. 402 WOBA, 242 ISO score, somebody with a lot of power who also draws a lot of walks. Again, if he's going to walk a couple guys and be forced to have to pitch to a guy like Goldie, one swing, Goldie can definitely make you pay for it. And that's really been the difference between Archer. The games that Archer's been good, he's given up a couple of those base runners and managed to get himself out of trouble. The games where Archer's been bad is when he walks a guy or gives up a double, and then he walks a guy, and then he throws a bad pitch and gives up a 2 or a 3-run home run, and then next thing you know, he does it again 2 or 3 innings later, and he has 6 earned runs over 5 innings and, gets pulled from the game with a score of like -4 or, a small single-digit fantasy score for the price that you pay. So he does have that upside. Like I said, it is tough because you never know which Archer you're going to get. If you get the good Chris Archer, he could go out there and put up 30 fantasy points for you. If you get the bad Chris Archer, the stack of Arizona bats could wind up winning the entire day. So I think he's a tournament play. I think you have, some rosters in the tournament where you throw him on. And then I think in order to hedge that, you take a roster or 2 in the tournament where, you fade Archer and you throw all the Arizona bats in there. And then you just hope that it's, basically if you look at his starts, it's either really, really good or really, really bad. So you just hope that he doesn't have one of those mediocre starts where he only gives up 2 or 3 runs or 4 runs. You either hope he goes out there and dominates or you hope he goes out there and gets lit up. And either one of those ways, it could wind up bringing you money. On the other side of this game, we got Robbie Ray, the lefty, pitching for Arizona. Right-handed bats have a higher average and more home runs against him. You look at this Tampa Bay team, they do hit left-handed pitching extremely well. Even without a guy like Logan Forsythe, who's probably their best bat against lefties, Longoria, 391 WOBA, 225 ISO, Brandon Guyer, who will be on the top of that order, 389 WOBA, 197 ISO, been hitting some big home runs against left-handed pitching this year. You look at guys like Steven Souza Jr., you look at guys like Steve Pearce, even Tyler Mata has been hitting up in the order against left-handed pitching. So, there's 5 guys right there that you can stack up on DraftKings. Stacking up Tampa Bay against left-handed pitching has been profitable so far this year. So, maybe we can get another big game out of them and, hopefully wind up taking down a tournament with it. Next game to look at, Atlanta against San Diego. You got Christian Frederick on the mound for San Diego, and he's a left-handed pitcher. Right-handed bats have a little bit of a higher average against them and a low fly ball rate. This Atlanta team has been epically bad against left-handed pitching. You look at this lineup, there's a lot of left-handed bats that play regularly in this lineup, and they do not hit right-handed pitching all that well. There's really nobody on this team that profiles well against left-handed pitching. The best bat they probably have from the right side is, I don't know, maybe Adonis Garcia, and that's not really saying a whole bunch. You look at their WRC plus number, their ISO score, they are like historically bad numbers. WRC plus is basically, to put it simply, it's something that kind of measures the offensive output that a team has independent of stadium. So they kind of, put all the teams together and give each stadium a little bit of a plus or minus, whether it's a hitter's park or a pitcher's park. And it tries to give you one solid baseline number that shows you the offensive output that a team has. And basically 100 is normal. So a team that's, 75 is about 3/4 as good as the average team. A team that's 150 is about 1.5 times better than the average team out there in the league. Right now, the Atlanta Braves WRC plus is right down around 50, which means that, if the average team puts up, let's say 3 or 4 runs on 6 or 7, hits and base runners, they're about half as good at that. So you're looking at about 2 runs on 3 or 4 base runners over a course of 9-inning games. It is just absurdly low. Like I said, I've been doing this and looking at these numbers for a couple of years right now, and it's one of the lowest numbers I've ever seen by any team against any handedness of pitcher. So I'm not telling you go out there and start Frederick. He's going to have a huge start. I'm just telling you that this Atlanta team is one of the worst we've ever seen against left-handed pitching. So I think that, Frederick might be in play. And obviously, as you can tell by the way I'm saying this, not using any Atlanta bats. Don't think any of these Atlanta bats are going to make it into my lineup. Next guy we can look at is Williams Perez, the right-handed pitcher on the other side of this game. Left-handed bats have a higher average against them, but right-handed bats are okay too. There really are no left-handed bats in the San Diego team, so there's really nobody we can talk about that profiles well. But the San Diego team has been putting up some runs lately, and they're facing a bad pitcher in Williams Perez here. So I guess you can look at guys like Will Myers in the 2-hole, Matt Kemp in the 3-hole, Yangervis Solarte. I mean, you look at those 3 guys. Those 3 guys are all, hitting the ball really, really well right now. And like I said, this San Diego team has been putting up some runs. So I know nobody really profiles, jumps off the page at you, but Williams Perez is a bad pitcher, and I think all 3 of those guys are going to be in play. Probably would want a little bit of exposure to him, although I'm never going to argue with anybody who decides to stack up against Williams Perez in the tournament. It's been something that's made money in the past, and I don't think you need to go away from it today. 2 games left on the docket. We got Cleveland going up against Seattle. James Paxton, the young lefty for Seattle, is on the mound. He's only had 1 start so far in 2016, and he got lit up. I mean, we're talking like 10, 11 hits, 7 or 8 runs that he gave up. Luckily, a couple of them were unearned, so I think he skated away, only giving up like 3 earned runs, but he gave up 8 runs in his start. So obviously, this is a guy that you can attack. You want to look at guys, the right-handed bats on Cleveland. So guys like Mike Napoli makes sense. 395 WOBA, 278 ISO score for him. So those are just some really, really big numbers against left-handed pitching. Francisco Lindor, 388 WOBA, 180 ISO. So another guy that I really like, shortstop option. Obviously, the price is getting a little elevated from where it was earlier in the season, but aren't many shortstops that hit in the middle of the order. This guy's been batting 3rd for them lately, so I think he's in play. You can look at a guy like Carlos Santana. You can look at a guy like Rajai Davis. These are other guys who might be in play here today. I do like Santana against the lefty. He's got a little bit of power from the right side. So those are the guys that I would probably be looking for. I do think you can stack up Cleveland here. I have no problem picking on Paxton today. I think these Cleveland bats are in a pretty good spot. Other side of this game, Trevor Bauer pitching. He's been solid, but he does give up a few too many walks, and he does give up a couple home runs. Left-handed bats have a very high fly ball rate against him, so that would probably be the way I'd try to attack him. And for me, that points out a guy like, Robinson Cano, who has the best numbers, over 360 WOBA, over 200 ISO score. He's got a bunch of home runs, like 13 of them already this year, hitting like 280, 290. So he's back to looking like the Cano he was in a Yankee uniform a couple of years ago. Kyle Seager also starting to hit again. I mean, this is a guy who burst onto the scene and was like a, first 3 or 4 round draft pick in season-long fantasy drafts. And then all of a sudden, he just kind of fell off the face of the earth. One thing he does do well is hit right-handed pitching, especially guys that, he can take deep. And like we said, Bauer throws the ball hard. When he doesn't have movement on his pitches and he keeps everything flat and straight, that is when guys tend to tee off on him. So I think Seager could be one of those guys that could tee off on him. And like you said, if we're looking for power bats that can get you with 1 swing, I think even some of the right-handers like a Nelson Cruz or a Dae-Ho Lee could be guys that you look at here as well. Like I said, I don't think I want to stack up these bats against Bauer, but Bauer does have that problem with giving up home runs every now and then. So if you want to take 1 or 2 of these guys as one-offs and hope that they're the ones that hit home runs today, I think that's probably the way that I would use most of the bats on Seattle. Remember, the game's in Seattle, not the greatest hitter's ballpark, so don't go overboard and stack up a whole bunch of these guys. Last game is Colorado at the LA Dodgers. Bolsinger is on the mound for the Dodgers, and he's actually been really well. The problem is he, came back off the injury list, and he's not pitching deep into games. He's only going about 5 or 6 innings. I mean, he's been lights out in those 5 or 6 innings, though, putting up like 18 to 24 fantasy points. So I think his price is under $7K today. At the price that he's at, you're still getting really good value for you if he just returns to what he's done the last couple games. Left-handed bats have a higher average against them, but this is a guy that keeps the ball on the ground, has a very low fly ball rate, gets a lot of ground balls. That's why he gets a lot of ground ball outs, can get himself out of jams with double plays. I think you want to look at a guy like Cargo, 415 WOBA, 309 ISO. He double donged yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. Arenado, righty on righty, very, very good hitter, righty on righty situations. 390 WOBA for him, 313 ISO score. You could probably look at guys like Gerardo Parra and Charlie Blackmon if you really want to go up against them. I think the thing you got to think about with Bolsinger here is he's a solid pitcher. They may not do a ton of damage, although they'll get some hits off him, but they may not do a ton of damage in the first 5 innings. But by the 6th inning or so, he's probably going to be out of the game and you get the bullpen in there. So if they can get a couple runs early, they get to the back part of that bullpen, not the best arms that they save from when they have a lead. I think they could wind up doing some damage against the bullpen. So it could be a game where, they have 2 runs going into the 5th inning and wind up finishing with 7 or 8 of them, kind of like they did yesterday. On the other side of this game, we got Tyler Chatwood on the mound. Right and left-handed bats have hit him pretty well. He is a ground ball pitcher, though, does keep the ball on the ground. And I think you want to look at the left-handed bats against them. So Corey Seager's the guy that stands out first. Absolutely on fire. 5 home runs in his last 2 games. 385 WOBA, 239 ISO since his call-up last season. Definitely somebody that's going to be in play for me here today. After that, you want to look at the left-handed bats. You got guys like Adrian Gonzalez, maybe a Jock Peterson. You may have like a Chase Utley leading off, although I'm not really a huge fan of that. You can also look at some of the right-handed bats. You got a guy like Justin Turner who's been hitting in the 3-hole, very good in righty-on-righty situations, so he kind of stands out. And then Trace Thompson has been playing really well this year in righty-on-righty situations as well. He's another guy that's been doing very well, and I think it's somebody that you can look at. So, that pretty much sums it up. Those are all the games that we have here on the slate today. As you can see, there's a bunch of good hitting options, a couple good pitchers on the mound that we're not going to be looking at. It is only a 10-game slate, so we don't have as much, as many different ways to go as we normally do. But I still think there's going to be low overlap today. You got a lot of options, a lot of different ways to go, and a lot of guys that you can pick on. So I think that even in tournaments today, you don't want to be, worried too much about having to fade too many guys that are going to be highly owned. I think you basically try to put together your best team today. Could even be your cash game team, or, maybe you take a few extra bats so you have a little more upside, and that's the way that I would go about doing it. So thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.